The reasons being for croaking the parish, to use the technical term, it's the Holy Trinity. Demographics, those dastardly Catholics with gray hair. Shortage of clergy, deadbeat parishes. All three are bogus. All three, not in all cases, but in the cases of parishes that want to stand up for their rights. First of all, changing demographics. Look, let's take this one downtown. Whose failure is it anyway to inspire Catholics and draw more Catholics into our church that professes to be Catholic with a large C and Catholic with a small c, universal? So please don't talk to me about purifying the church. The Catholic Church was purified by the schism in the 11th century and by the Reformation. Should we try it again in a 500-year cycle and really downsize it to a GM or a Chrysler? Let's not go there. Clergy shortage. Who has failed to inspire younger men and women into a noble calling? The bishops. It's their failure anyway. And by the way, the story that's going to break in Boston next week on how the Archdiocese of Boston is now eating its own. It is turning against its own priests, and it is going to squeeze the hell out of their retirement benefits. That's in this year of the priest. That's a great recruiting poster to bring more young men and women into religious life. Insolvent parishes, here, I happen to know whereof I speak. It was Dick Lennon that in convocations to all priests at the auditorium in Boston College in December of '03 and then in January of '04 spoke of deadbeat parishes, parishes that could not pay their bills, 25%, 33%. Well, by the sworn statement in Rome of the lawyer for the Archdiocese of Boston in responding to our 10 challenges, I would have to say that Dick Lennon lied. Because the sworn affidavits filed by Martha Vagan, a qualified canon attorney, qualified to practice before the Apostolic Signatura in Rome, and I can translate the Latin from memory. Reconfiguration in Boston was caused by the extreme hardship and by the compelling necessity, this is all Latin, because the Archdiocese itself was on the verge of financial ruin. So, Dick, I'm sorry, but your nose is just growing longer and longer and longer. Now, and finally, let me say a few words factually about your ordinary. And some of it is very documented, some of it is a sensible inference. And it comes from a group of priests known to me collectively as Deep Chalice. They're informants, and you should be developing your own. And there's more than a dozen in this group. Dick Lennon was handpicked by the unlamented Bernie Law. When Bernie Law left in disgrace and never had the guts to face the camera in Boston, in December of '02, he literally snuck out of town on a financier's private jet, went to Rome, and by prearrangement, at that point, John Paul, let's be clear, who really didn't know what the hell was going on. At that point, Bernie's resignation was accepted. And in Navy terms, through a deep selection, the next in line was the Vicar General, Bishop Edevan. But strings were pulled, and from St. John's Seminary came Richard Lennon to be the apostolic delegate, namely the acting Archbishop of Boston. And Lennon was our apostolic delegate from mid-December of '02, and the timelines are very important, until July of '03, when Sean Patrick O'Malley, a Capuchin, not that there's anything wrong with that, was installed as Archbishop of Boston, with no experience in the Diocese of Boston and no notion of the absolute snake pit politics that are taking place in the Chancery. So Dick has been running the Archdiocese from December of '02 O'Malley comes in July of '03. O'Malley announces a sex abuse settlement in September of '03. Now, unless he's Superman, and with all due respect, he ain't. Somebody handed him something and said, sign here. So Boston executed an $85 million settlement for 500 plus alleged victims of sexual abuse, which seemed all the money in the world. And years later, the Archdiocese of Los Angeles announced a settlement for roughly the same number of alleged victims, for $660 million rather than $85 million. But in any case, O'Malley comes to town in July, sex abuse is resolved in September. In December, he has an all-priests meeting, and we kick off reconfiguration. There's a press conference in May of '04. O'Malley announces it, then turns it over to Lennon, who announces this is the most thorough, careful process that we ever seen in the world. I've gone through all that. Over the summer, who the hell knows what to do? We are where you are. But a strange thing happens, starting around Labor Day, and then going into October. First one church, then another, then another, then another, then another. 9 churches are occupied and go into vigil. That's October of '04. In November of '04, Sean Patrick O'Malley issues a 3-page, single-spaced letter to all Catholics in the Archdiocese, unbeknownst to his number 2, Richard Lennon, and basically says, it's known as a suicide letter, because one part of it says, in his own handwriting, in his own words, this is the most deceitful thing I've ever done, closing parishes, and there are nights when I go to sleep and I pray that the Lord will take me home. But then I wake up the next morning. And a few days later, O'Malley announces the appointment of the Mead-Eisner Committee to review all of the reconfiguration handiwork that was just the most brilliant thing that ever sprung from the mind of Western man. No mistakes were made. At that point, according to Deep Chalice, there were no longer one-on-one meetings between the Archbishop and his Vicar General, Dick Lennon, and a 2-year effort to trade him started. We heard he was going to Vermont. We heard he was going to Rhode Island. We heard he was going to Tennessee. And then when somebody from the, sorry about the media and the disarray there, but when somebody from the Plain Dealer, not Mike O'Malley, but his predecessor, called, because the announcement had been made, and asked me for a quote, I didn't have anything scripted. And I just said, God help the Catholics of Cleveland. Now, just a quick footnote, and it happened in Syracuse, and because of my peculiar background, I'm honor-bound to say something about this. One of the unwritten stories in all of this is the disgraceful way in which Vietnamese Catholics have been treated. And I know some of that history. I haven't lived all of it, thank you very much. But in 1954, and those of you from Eastern Europe who had the experience or your grandparents had of living under communism, the United States Navy, the institution that I love more than any on the face of this globe, took about 1 million North Vietnamese Catholics and resettled them into what was about to become South Vietnam. 54. Then in 75, whoops, not a glorious moment in American history, they got on boats and finally made their way. They've come to the States. They've been lost, but they hold together as a community, and they're bounced around from parish to parish. And how in the name of God, literally, they have managed to hold on to their faith and their belief is beyond me. And they're still Catholics. So please remember them in your prayers. Now, finally, speaker's favorite words, these are the 7